I got to figure out my what's going on in this other computer.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Building Information Modeling, Not Just Clash Detection Anymore. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A window at any point, and we will address them at the end. If you're looking to receive continuing education credits for today's webinar, all attendees can access their credit and a certificate of completion directly in their CMAA Learning Center by the end of today. And as always, a quick thank you to our webinar sponsor, Project Mates. And now it's time to introduce today's speakers. We have with us Raul Martinez, who is the lead for K2's Virtual Design and Construction Technology Group and Construction Consulting Group divisions. He has 28 years of experience in virtual design construction technology with building information modeling, risk management, and BIM solutions. We also have with us Mike Marcell, who is president of K2's Government Operating Solutions and Construction Consulting Group divisions. He has 20 years of experience in project management and controls, program scheduling, risk management, and BIM solutions, and has led projects for a wide range of clients, including government agencies, Lockheed Martin, General Electric, General Dynamics, and Westinghouse. So a big welcome to Raul and Mike. Thanks for presenting today. And I will turn everything over to you. I know everybody's eager to hear about Minecraft and Legos.
Well, thank you, Carly. Appreciate the introduction. Welcome to our presentation, Building Information Modeling, Not Just Clash Detection Anymore. Discussing such a broad topic as virtual design construction and building information modeling is now built around extensive collegiate and university coursework. I don't expect we can cover the breadth of VDC and BIM, but we can try and look at a small slice where we believe we can do some bridge building in order to advance our recognition, knowledge, adoption, and perhaps lay down some foundation to help springboard VDC and BIM further down the road. We'll look at BIM from a 50,000-foot view to get a lay of the land, what is the framework, and what we're going to home in on today. My name is Raul Martinez. I'm the Virtual Design Construction Manager for K2, Critical Path Controls Group. K2 specializes in project management control, systems integration, and the deployment and implementation of technology solutions. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., K2 has built a national and international partner base that includes Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and large airports and transportation authorities. My 30-year background now in building and construction technology spans 10 years in engineering, 13 years in subcontractor design for the MEP trades, rounding out the remainder of my tenure in IT, robotics, construction technology, virtual design construction, and site logistics with manufacturers and GCs in the Midwest and across the country. I'm joined by Mike Marcell, president of K2.
Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Marcell, the president of the K2, basically our consulting services organization, which includes the Government Operating Solutions Group and our Critical Path Controls Group. And we are excited here today to discuss with you about the future and the evolution of building information modeling and the integration of VDC into everybody's active and ongoing projects. I've been in this industry for 25 years. I should update my bio from 20 to 25, but you know, who cares after 20, right? And I started in the BIM world after I was a part of the litigation group here at K2 and into the project controls group, and started getting into the building information modeling with the integration of P6 and Navisworks back in the late 2000s. And then started getting into assisting several of the software developers in designing modeling software like some of the ones we'll see here today, and then also supporting in integrating risk mitigation for claims avoidance, and want to always stay out of court, right? So the objective is to get the information in front of people fast enough to make those decisions. And I've been an adjunct professor with College of Performance Management and with the Association for the Advancement of Cost Engineers, and excited here to discuss to you about this. So, Raul.
So BIM is not a new technology process. It's a degree study in major universities, as mentioned, and many trade schools around the world. BIM's been around since the 1980s and has been heavily focused on design and design clash detection. This series of discussions presents BIM as an industry best practice and sequentially includes information required for design, 3D modeling, 4D scheduling, 5D cost management, asset management, and other future dimensions from the perspective of the integrated program manager of the very near future. The architecture and construction industry is ever evolving into smarter ways to efficiently accomplish more with less. Within this evolution is a drive to better integrate all the disciplines that in various ways impact the phases of concept, design, startup, production, closeout, and sustainment. Historically, the AEC industry has been stovepiped among stakeholders, be it owners, primes, subcontractors, and throughout all the phases. BIM and further VDC dissolves those stratifications by creating a transparent communication path to design and manage programs from the baseline design through the sustainment of the completed product. From here, we're going to focus on integration and ultimately the ROI between 3D, 4D, and 5D to better lay the groundwork for the subsequent expansion of VDC and evolve the BIM dimensions mirage to the oasis we believe it to be.
I did want to mention one thing real quick here as the integration and development of BIM. Just about a year ago, we were speaking with regards to the dimensions of BIM, and it was 8 dimensions, right? And it was really, you know, at 60 was energy sustainment, 70 was the facilities management, and 80 was the really the decommissioning, and it was centered around energy and in the power systems. And what you're seeing right now is as we're learning more and as the industry is growing, we are adding the dimensions that are more effective for managing projects and being more effective in controlling projects for the full life cycle. So go ahead there, Raul.
So the current VDC market, where are we at today? Well, the majority of organizations out there use BIM up through clash detection. Then really at that point, things start to fall off. You see everybody still grabbing a Primavera schedule or another separate cost tool, working out of those environments. PM schedulers, field teams still printing out a design schedule or shop drawing and highlighting it, submitting that as a change order. Why? Everyone's so comfortable with that. The industry, especially outside of the United States, has moved way beyond that, but people have not. More and more technology products for construction are coming out. They're getting wider and wider at their capacity and what they can do. Current methods for VDC through design integration, scope, validation, and controls. Right now, primarily, we do it for the purpose of clash detection. We're going to see some stuff here today that we're going to be able to demonstrate you're missing scope in your project, some of which you haven't even identified or where you're going to build it. One of the biggest challenges we have today is that companies, big organizations, have different ways for using this information. Some all the way to where we're at, others just for clash detection. Vast variances cause different dynamics from customer to customer. Processes are not similar across a lot of these organizations. This creates a dynamic when you're trying to work as an owner, trade partner, or even as you're moving throughout the industry in terms of employment. Because it's a new and evolving technology, people are trying to get in front of it. In some cases, it's hard to keep up. Design requirements that designers are held to, AIA standards, ISO 9000, et cetera, they are still positioned on the fastest way to design something. Faster doesn't mean better. When you integrate that into schedules, which is means and methods, you have to break all those objects apart. In order for BIM to work effectively, BIM has to be detailed. The design has to be broken down to the chunks that align with how you plan to build. You can't have a 7-story wall. That's not how you're going to build it. The industry is starting to really evolve, but what's happening is owners are spending the money for the cheapest way to build the design. It's turned over to the construction company, and then the construction company is the one charging the owner to take it down to the next level so you can actually do any of this stuff. It's almost better if the designers should charge a little bit more and do it right up front. Scope validation and controls. We'll show you here in a moment where you can see objects that are not tied to anything. Quality verification and adherence to design. Now what you start doing with BIM as you get into commissioning and closeout. Or even during construction on a month-to-month basis, you can perform a validation of where everything is installed. Is it what the design said? You can see very quickly where things are not installed correctly by cross-referencing against point clouds, photogrammetry, or other terrain data collection systems that are available today. Now, the current state we're just really digging into that. You're seeing that what's being used heavily, it's being used heavily overseas, but here in the United States, not so much. We used to be the leader at the beginning, but now you've got Korea, you've got France, UK, Germany. They're all far, far ahead of where we're at. Don't wait until it's done. And you're commissioning, don't wait until there's a change order because there's a pipe missing or something in the wrong place. You can address it much faster. Risk mitigation avoidance. This is where we start getting into claims mitigation, where you say you can evaluate impacts much, much easier. You can see who's causing the problems. You're starting to see these things being used as a means of tracking where people are performing. In the already here future, it's going to be the primary aspect because you have a lot of information in your hands. You're able to make much more effective, rapid, comprehensive decisions. Whereas before you'd have to call a few folks, check your schedule, check with your scheduler, pull the design up, check with your field operations folks, assemble a meeting. If you're living out of the model and it's being actively updated and actively utilized, you can make those decisions much more effectively in a much more rapid period with a lot less people. In today's world, that's what we do in clash detection. In the future world, that's the way we're going to do monthly management meetings. Now that we know where we're at and have glimpsed what could be, Mike, what are some of the challenges to get there?
Thank you. So, some of the major challenges that we're seeing in terms of the standards and how they're applied. So, first of all, most people don't even realize there are actually standards out there. So you have the International Organization for Standardization. That is ISO, right? And that has 19650. You've got the publicly available standards under ISO, the PAS 1192. These are all foundational elements that speak to the utilization of BIM in the construction industry, right? And you can also see in the federal government space in the United States, GSA, General Services Administration, 15 years ago, started establishing the integration of 4D, 5D modeling. And you can go out on the GSA website and you can look up BIM and you can evaluate the individual segments that can be used. But people don't know about these things, right? So it seems like you're going into a world that is real dark, that nobody knows anything about. But the reality is that it's been around forever, right? It's been around for a long time. Most of the time when we get into conversations with clients regarding BIM, it's what's it going to cost, right? How much time is it going to take? Who are the other resources that I'm going to be required? I actually sat at a presentation or actually in a conference several weeks ago. And the comment came up from the folks that were presenting about the fact that there is a 2 to 3 time multiplier on the cost. And when you start addressing, what does that mean? Well, it costs only one person maybe a week to update a schedule. And that information was sufficient in order to meet the requirements of the deliverable. And when they started using the building information modeling and BDC approach, well, now they wanted somebody on site, and they really wanted somebody ingrained in the day-to-day operations. Well, yeah, that would be a difference in cost, but you're comparing apples and oranges, right? So if you really stuck with the same model of statusing the building information model with the schedule at the end of every month, then it's really not a substantial difference in price, right? In the time effort, everything's integrated. Everyone knows. What I've noticed the biggest thing in terms of time is that when you go out to a site with a schedule, and by the way, this is very difficult for a person who's lived their whole life in scheduling to speak to how this is going to take over. But the world of scheduling, where you have an activity and you go out onto the site and you do your assessments, what does that activity mean, right? How do you know you're really 25% complete? And when you sit down with the foreman later on and you find out, well, actually, I guess we forgot to include those other 3 rooms that haven't started yet because there's staged material in there. When you're dealing with BIM, everything is right there. What your activity is all linked to those particular activities, are linked to objects within the model. Okay. And the biggest challenge we're seeing is really the understanding. And the objective here today is to give everybody an insight, the understanding that it's not just clash detection. So the world of design in the 3D model you take it in and you do all your assessments, you do your pre-construction meetings, you sit with all the teams, you define the levels in which trades are going to operate, your trade partners, and then you put that model away and you print it all out, and then you bubble up PDF documents for the rest of the program, right? And you run out of a schedule, which, by the way, you sat with every one of those design documents in order to build that schedule, and then you've put it away. So what does that mean in terms of each of those individual activities, right? And we've noticed that the U.S. is just a little bit behind in terms of how it's being applied, right? So Scandinavia, they were the first, right? And Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Norway, they all kicked off in the early 2000s in the early adoption of utilizing this and including it in their tenders, right? And how they're assessing the requirements and applying it to the individual subcontractors, right? UK kicked in. They started really getting into mandatory BIM in the mid 2000s, right? But US really, we took on the idea of BIM in about the late 2000s, early when you start getting into 2020, 2010, 2011, 2013, those timeframes, you're starting to get into utilization of the BIM market, but it's really focused in clash detection, right? And it's not as mandatory, although agencies have been writing to this stuff for many, many years. Army Corps of Engineers, right, have a whole segment on BIM. And so, and where are these performed in the landscape internationally? Those are all because of the mandatory requirements of these other countries, right? And those movements for the design, they're starting to really build out those requirements so that the actual solicitation, the tender, includes much more specific expectations out of what you're going to see in the bid. And so what we're seeing today is the shift from a lot of what was the standard construction contractors to, I was just reading a proposal about a year ago for a major capital improvement program. And it stated 4 sections for building information modeling. It had the 3D requirement that was well established. And then it said 4D and 5D and 6D, right, for energy evaluation. And each one of those was about 3 sentences. And it said, you will have a 4D integrated model. You will have a cost incorporated, and you will ensure that the energy consumption, you will do your calculations, validate the design. Well, those are very loose in terms of requirements. So what's the future state, right? So the future state, we look at this is really incorporating at the larger level. You start to incorporate all of your standardization across your organization. You build it out at the portfolio level, and you actually start to utilize this information for benchmarking, for better estimates on your future programs, determining subcontractor or trade partners that were maybe having challenges in the past, determining better, more efficient means to be to stage materials. As you know, you've seen a lot of the building information modeling from this particular element from the standpoint of where do cranes go, right? And how do you stage cranes? Well, now you can start looking at even more in the details of the materials. And we'll show you some of that here shortly as we get into some of the designs. I mean, later in the discussion. But we'll also look at the life cycle of the project. It doesn't end at design. Now it goes into physical construction, and we can get into risk mitigation. We can get into performance management. We can get into identification of particular challenges that are occurring on the project and dealing with those in an early stage. And we'll talk about that here shortly also. But it also is a significant increase in the capability to truly communicate. And this right here, this one is one, if we could circle this one, I'd circle it all day long. I sat in a 3-hour discussion talking about major impacts to a customer of ours, where they were ready to present to the owner what impacts happened on the project. And we spent 3 hours negotiating exactly what the impacts were within a bar on a schedule. And we almost figured out what everything meant together, right? We were almost able to communicate everything real effectively so that everybody was aware. And in the last 15 minutes, I said, hey, let me just show you what we're looking at in the model. And I presented the model. And within 15 minutes, every person in the room had an absolute clear idea of exactly where the impact was, what areas were not touched because of the delays, what the change orders truly addressed. It was very straightforward. And that's what we're trying to get to today, is being able to utilize this information. Instead of waiting for the disruption, why don't we use it on a monthly basis to be more effective in how we perform? Okay. And that this will evolve the industry best practices, right? You will still be able to maintain recommended practices by AACE. You'll be able to maintain the requirements in the design authority of AIA, right? But these aspects will start to build out stronger and stronger capabilities.
Why can't it be easy? Like scrolling through my apps on my phone, or maybe playing a game. Let's see a few things we can do with these tools that we have right now and tying them together. I think it's safe to say that we're all familiar with 3D models, what they are, how they're used for the most part, and possibly how to get on and navigate around it, like playing a video game. 3D models have been as synonymous in the past 15 years as 2D paper drawings were for the previous 100 years. Much like two-dimensional paper, BIM is now thoroughly ingrained in the industry. BIM is to the point where we get to clash detection and then everything starts to fall off. Our next stop on the BIM dimensions road is the 4D swim lane, time and schedules.
And here's where you see the true advancement, right? This is what I was talking about earlier. So you've got your project schedule, you've got your Ask the Power project, you even have the Primavera, right? So, and you remember back in the 1980s, right? The construction industry was really starting to boom in what we were building, and there was this requirement for scheduling. So, well, what we're going to do that? That's going to cost too much. It's going to take too much time. I don't understand it. Very similar bullets to what we saw on the previous slide, and now you're all the way down to sub-tier subcontractors operating in schedules in order to control what's going on, right? So here is your schedule, right? Your bar charts with very strong definitions of exactly what you're supposed to do, right? You should be able to look at the schedule and know exactly where you're supposed to be on a day-to-day basis, right? Well, what's the next phase, right? So we've done all the costing, we've done all the scheduling. Now we're going to integrate into all the costing, right? So we've set up all of our budgets. We've got our estimate sheets. We've determined our costing from the best case scenarios based on all the estimating we've done. All this data also lives within the drawings themselves, right? Within the model, because you can have a bill of material that establish the pricing of the objects. But all this information is all now segregated. You have a schedule that was developed. You have all this estimating that was developed. You have a 3D model that was developed. So what do you do with everything, right? So here it all is, all in one place. You have your model, you have your schedule in the center, all your detailed activities, and then on the bottom, your cost analysis. Everything's centralized. Now, this is a tool that we use. There's all kinds of different tools that have this capability, but now you've centralized everything into one environment. So now as the project manager, you can see specifically where you are in the building, to the activities that you're working to, the very particular effort that's required, and actually the cost breakup of that. And across the bottom, you see your time scale, your overarching time scale. One thing as we move through the future of this discussion, you're going to see each one of these individual presentations will have a time scale across the top. So you'll be able to track the time scale, but it will be able to show you in terms of real time where we are. And that's the capability we're able to establish right here, is that you have your models with your schedules and your costs integrated into one point.
So what can we do with this? What's the next step? I mean, I don't think anybody wants to be looking at a combination of bar charts, activities, line graphs. Maybe the pretty picture is nice, but how do I get that message across to other team members? Well, we start looking at animations and how this movement actually happens.
So what we want to look at today is the baseline. So now as you see across the top, you've got your schedule moving across. You have your activities over in the top right-hand corner. This is the legitimate baseline schedule for the construction project. This isn't a picture being done by the marketing team. And you can see the build of your floor, exactly what work is happening as the activities go by. You install your plumbing. These are the activities that are associated with the installation of plumbing, right? And these are the activities that are required by that mechanical contractor. Now you're seeing all of the duct work going in, right? So, and we can color code all this information so that you can see very quickly where people need to be. Now, as we're walking into September, I need to make sure my mechanical people are ready to go. You can also get to the point of pointing to where they should start in the building and moving across, right? Now, you know, your electrical trades can come in. So you can prepare your folks, instead of sitting down in coordination meetings every week, looking at 3 or 4 week or 6 week look aheads off the schedule, you can actually do it right out of the design, right off of the legitimate schedule that you performed against, right? And that gives you that capability to build against it. Well, now we've established a baseline, right? So what do we want to do with the information on a month-to-month basis? We can start to really capture the details. One thing I wanted to capture in this baseline versus update discussion, you notice these boxes that are sitting completely still here. We talked about earlier the value of being able to merge the schedule and the activities to get the activities and the model together in one place. Right now, I can tell you there are 4 systems that are not in your schedule. And according to this model, you are not planning on installing these, okay? So right off the bat, you have significant scope validation. If everything doesn't tie, then you know you don't have activities in your plan to do it. So these 4 items were left out of the schedule, and we need to be able to tie those back. So that was one of the elements we talked about earlier in terms of scope validation. So we'll go ahead and proceed now. And if you notice, on the top is the baseline, the bottom's the update. And what I want you to watch is, as you're getting into the timeframes into May and June, you're going to start to see the baseline moving, right? And you're not going to see as much production in the update. You're having disruptions, right? Things are happening. You're getting your piping installed, as we talked about earlier in the baseline. Piping's not really getting in right now, okay? And then we start to pull the duct work in. Still a little behind on your update on the bottom section. The top portion, now you have all your mechanical going in, all your electrical going in, just getting into mechanical and electrical now on the update, okay? So you can see on a slice of time exactly where things are not moving as you expected. And now you can start addressing those. Maybe you can speak to a particular subcontractor trade partner. Hey, listen, I'm not sure what's causing you disruption, but you're not moving forward the way we expected, okay? And this is where we were able to demonstrate for our customer that you can actually see the physical delay, and they were able to come back to us and say, but these areas here were actually not installed. Okay, and now we could make those adjustments and incorporate those impacts and give them more insight of exactly what's going on in the project. Well, you noticed on this particular presentation that there were impacts. Well, what were those impacts, right? So now what we can do is apply those impacts into the model. And what you'll look is the red activities on the bottom here, as they're going to flash by, right? And you'll see the individual impacts as they occur in the month that the fragnet was applied. And so you're seeing those in the actual schedule, right? The delivery of the fire systems, that was a problem, right? We had to apply a delay into the schedule for the fragnet. And then you could see still that the upper portion of the baseline is performing, but the bottom portion is not, right? And those delays have now started to culminate into a point where you aren't able to produce or follow the level of the construction, okay? And we noticed this in many situations where it's easy to demonstrate the actual delay and then apply the fragnets as they occur. And you can see those delays based on those fragnets. And you can do all kinds of adjustments, you know? So if we wanted to show the fragnet longer, we could absolutely show it longer. You can see acceleration, right? So now you can see more impacts that are starting to happen, right? The commissioning of the HVAC, that delay is not allowing us to proceed with the next step that we wanted to in that schedule, right? And now, one of the major dynamics when you're doing updates versus baseline, and just to be 100% transparent, you have two portions of a job that are a little harder to demonstrate. You have the design and you have the commission. And so you have to be mindful that when you get into commissioning, you got to be prepared to color code your schedule. You have to be prepared to provide coding fields in there to allow the schedule to be able to demonstrate those. But everything you're seeing right now is all based on the legitimate construction schedule integrated into the design. There's no other special things that are going on. We have codes that tell you what trade it is. We have frag nets that are identified specifically. Those things are popping up accordingly. So it's nothing out of the ordinary that you would normally do in your project planning, but it is incorporated into a design to allow you to see it in a way that's more efficient for you. So now that we have this information, right, let's look at our cost curves. Well, we've incorporated the fifth dimension, and what we're going to see is the building coming up, and you can see the performance of your cost, right? You can see your planned value, you can see your actual costs, and because the status date of the schedule was back, that's why the actual costs aren't moving. But you could actually start trending forward in time, and you can see now we have the impacts. You remember the impacts in March and April in the other schedule where all the frag nets were. Now you're starting to show performance lag, right? And you can see on the left-hand side are all the activities as they're building up through the construction of this building. On the bottom right-hand corner, you can see all of your labor, your cost productivity. Where are things being spent? And you can actually do it down to the trade. You can do it to individual, whatever level detail you want, because you remember, you're doing this based on all of the information in the design. So now you can really slice and dice this thing into much smaller pieces, right? And you can take maybe a floor. Maybe I really want to address a particular element in the floor and see what the results of that particular element are. Well, I could see what that impact was for that particular area of the project, okay? So you can really start to take this thing apart in a way that a bar chart doesn't give you, schedule can't give you. And you can now see what the results of those impacts were in terms of cost, in terms of if you resource load the schedule, you can see it in a resource, labor productivity. So you can determine what your productivity value was on the labor utilization, okay? So now all the information that you normally have to take apart in individual segments are all in one place. And every month we can go look at where it is, how well did we do, what are the mitigations that we have to plan for the next month. Okay, so now I've established that, I want to see some indicators. Well, where did I accelerate? Where did I delay, right? By the way, all the same different high ride, right? So here it is. I've got the behind schedule in my foundations and my piles. I started to catch up in the base concrete in the early stages of the project. And I've got my moving ahead of schedule here to accelerate. Everything in green in this particular model is the future state. So the cool thing about it also is that I can see where I was behind, how I picked up, where I accelerated, and also where I need to be in order to sustain my schedule. I can run a whole bunch of what if scenarios. Maybe I don't want to build in this particular approach. I can adjust those with different plans and incorporate those as what if scenarios, and I can look at them side by side. Just like we did with the baseline and update, I can see different views. But the nice thing is that you could start off with where you were, you can see how you're performing, and you can even see where you're supposed to be, all in the model itself, right? So now that I've captured every bit of what's going to happen from a standpoint of where it was, what's the most important thing in a schedule? The critical path, right? So what you're looking on the top left is the actual full building. That's the critical path of the building. On the right, bottom right, you're looking at a very particular floor. So now you can actually see the critical path of the individual trade on the floor, or you can see the whole project critical path, right? You can see the specifics of where you need to be, and you can start aligning with your trade partners. One of the biggest things we noticed with this is that you see the way it was built on the bottom left, starting from the bottom of the screen and moving up for the HVAC. Well, we were able to start looking at staged material, and we could plan ahead that next week. The critical path says you need to start staging material starting at the bottom end of your building and moving up to the north end, right? So south end to north, and it's on the bottom southwest, right? Well, I'm sorry, southeast. So at that point, you can start evaluating the staging of material. If there's anybody in the way, you can really start assessing whether or not there's impacts that potentially could occur because of availability, stacking of trades. Maybe trades weren't aware. You could always reach out to the HVAC and say, hey, listen, you know, you're supposed to start on Tuesday and you're supposed to start in that corner. And that's when you find out several weeks ahead, oh, by the way, I haven't fabricated that, right? This also becomes part of your approach for prefabrication plans, spooling plans, anything like that can all come out of how you're going to build, right? So we're working spooling schedules right now, which will help mechanical identify exactly where they need to be. Well, if you have a critical path on a floor, then I can assess where I need to start and potentially what items I need to address as I'm moving through that project plan, right? And like I said earlier, you're looking at the critical path of a floor, you're looking at the critical path of a building. And now you take a look at this versus the critical path of your schedule in your bar chart format. Are you able to assess the same level of information as fast, right? So now that it's all incorporated, I can do fast, rapid decision-making. I can do early mitigation. I can plan for challenges, and I can even rotate. I can maybe say, well, instead of going from the southeast corner, I can start at the northwest corner, and we can move across. What does that do, right? So we kind of moved through those slides pretty quickly, didn't we?
Yeah, we sure did.
We give everybody an opportunity to ask a ton of questions, right? So key summary, key takeaways out of this, right, is we want to be able to visualize your project, right? Instead of looking at your schedule, instead of analyzing the specifics of the activities within the schedule, let's look at what it looks like in the design itself. We can integrate and validate the scope. So now we've assessed where the schedule is. We know what the cost looks like. We can validate the scope as all being incorporated. If you recall several slides earlier, when we did the update versus baseline, those 4 objects were not incorporated. We can see that immediately, right? Anything that's outstanding is held out like that, we can address immediately. And then we can simplify that information. Like I said earlier, tell me which was easier to look at, the critical path of the activities in the schedule or the critical path of the model, right? You can understand that extremely fast. You can get early recognition of those issues, right? You can see the dynamics. You can be able to put mitigation strategies in place on a month-to-month basis. If you do these on a week-to-week basis, whatever it may be. Remember, I wanted to just clarify the process you do for statusing your schedule that I've been doing for the last 20 some years is no different. You status your schedule just like you always have. You incorporate it into the model and you receive the results. Okay. You can also bypass the schedule and go straight into the model and do it all. Okay. But I just want to make sure for everybody who's so comfortable with the way we've done things, it's not that big of a leap for this technology transfer, right? And then you increase your capability of reporting, right? Instead of slice and dicing the schedule the way you normally would, you could slice the model up into all types of different levels, all the way down to the object level. I want to see exactly where that object was and when it's supposed to be installed. Now, keep in mind, the details of the objects are as good as the details of your plan. So unless you're doing every single light as an activity, then you're not going to see it down to each light as a date. But you can absolutely see how you incorporated 2 objects together, how you phased everything. You can do risk, you can do what if scenarios based on that. And you can get significant amount of indices, as you saw earlier. Where did I accelerate? Where was I behind schedule? Okay. And you can enable this effective mitigation early. No one wants to go to court, right? Everyone wants to mitigate. Everyone wants to get the job done and get off onto the next job. Critical aspect of construction. So we want to be able to demonstrate that information early so that you can make those decisions with your team accordingly. Okay. And now that you have all the information, it's not just clash detection. You're able to use that for the full life cycle. And what we didn't talk about too much in terms of the details of the slides is you can get into, once you've established the installation date. So if you saw earlier in the update, you notice that the mechanical systems were installed in March. Well, now I know that those air handling units are installed. They go into their maintenance cycle. I can see the duration of my warranty because I know the date it was installed. And then I can start putting together my maintenance plans for facility controls for the life cycle of those units. And I can say, hey, by the way, that the diffusers only last maybe 10 years. Okay, well, then I know I'm going to mark in 10 years from 2023. I'm going to see 2033 to make sure I double check those dampers, right? And that gives you early warning visibility into your maintenance and facility control plans also, okay? And we talked about all the different dynamics where you could do quality assessment. I can verify in my status that that exactly where you said it was supposed to be installed, it was installed, okay? So, and Raul and I have been working significantly on different types of drone management, and Raul, I'll let you speak a little bit about some of the other emerging technology from that.
Sure. I mean, there's, as I mentioned earlier in our presentation, there's a lot of information when you look at it from a VDC perspective, virtual design and construction. We talked a little bit about BIM and how BIM is pushed into the 4D and the 5D, but we have all the way up to 8D, where we use the drones, we use Trimble units, we use all kinds of photogrammetry and point clouds to combine into these models and make these quick determinations on what we want to do in the field. But we're still stuck at the clash detection stage. Yeah, there's a lot of companies that are playing around with the drones, playing around with the robotic total stations, but we haven't brought it together yet. And that's why I mentioned that it was a mirage. If you think back to our second slide, there was I think level 10, 9, and 8 were in the gray area, which is what I call the mirage stage, where we can see that there's something out there that we can combine with what we're doing, but we're not quite there yet. And then there's the things that we are doing today. And so, we're trying to shore up the first three, 3, 4, and 5, so that we can say, okay, modeling, you're not going to be in a silo anymore. Time and schedule, you're not going to be in a silo. Cost, you don't have to be in a silo. We can actually connect all three of those and help for the information to go back and forth seamlessly in order to create the foundation for us to build 6, 7, 8, and then even further down 9 and 10. So with that, I want to thank Carly, CMA, Mike, thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, for the presentation. And we want to leave a little bit of time for questions, and then maybe get into the nuts and bolts of it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions that have come in already. And some of them are surrounding the software, understandably. So Adamir was wondering what software was being used in the example that you showed, the model that you showed?
So the animations that we were showing, we used a combination of, there were Revit models in there, there were AutoCAD models in there, they're all kind of Rhino 3D. We combined a few different things there, and then we pushed it into Navisworks. That's our primary 3D analyzation tool right now, just because it really shrinks down the models. And then from there, we can further go into the next program, which would be a Synchro. We use Synchro 4D. We find that it's more seamless than some of the other softwares, and it combines the schedule with the model, with some of the other Excel data sheets like estimating and cost analysis.
Okay. And sort of piggybacking off of that, Lionel was wondering, what is your opinion on the different BIM packages available in the design and construction industries? Larger organizations tend to hold on to MicroStation, and younger, smaller organizations embrace Revit and newer software. He also says interoperability, say that 3 times fast, issues and knowledge limitations and obvious delays always arise. So what's
Right.
your general opinion on everything that's out there right now?
Well, being in the industry as long as I have, it has given me a really good rear view mirror into, what were we trying to do 25 years ago, 30 years ago, and how has that evolved into today? And I think a lot of the smaller companies, everybody's trying to get the ROI. right? Everybody's trying to make money, survive, and push forward to the next project. And they're not going to be forced to go to newer software or different software unless the stakeholders ask for it, unless they say, you know what, I want these analytics. I want to know what my cost is. I want to see the model. I want to see the trim work on the VAV boxes. And so for the companies that are using Pro-E, MicroStation, or even AutoCAD, you know, they're comfortable in their spot. Nobody's really requested any more of them than the actual model. But once the stakeholders do ask them for that, they will be pushed into the next level. And I probably would compare it akin to apps, right, on a phone. A lot of people had a flip phone for a long time until they realized, you know what, I really want to start ordering stuff, or I want to look at the news, or I want to look at this, I want to look at that. And then they graduated to a smartphone, then they graduated to an iPhone, and now they're scrolling left and right and up and down and all that. And so once they get there, hopefully, you know, we'll bring them along with us, because one thing that I heard a long time ago that I think is very apropos is you have to meet people where they're at. If they're at MicroStation, then meet them there and show them how to come forward. And I'll try to refer to our first slide, maybe a little later if somebody asked about it, but it kind of references back to the gaming world. You know, the gaming world is far, far ahead of where we're at, but we're kind of tracking in on the same road.
Yeah, it's interesting. KPMG did a paper about, I want to say about 6-7 years ago, on the different levels of organizations and their aptitude to grow with technology. You know, and it was surprising, because I would have always thought the big companies with the individual technology groups would be the fastest moving, but it actually was this, you know, the mid-size organizations that have the highest interest in potentially jumping on newer advanced technology. And I mean, you sit and think about back in the room in Poughkeepsie, New York in 1977, when all the folks were sitting there going, you know, what is this Steve Jobs guy has this crazy fruit that's going to be some personal computer, right? And now, you know, they struggled through all that, right? And I always look at software in an interesting light. You know, used to be the rational unified process for software development, and in 2001 they came out with Agile. The biggest challenge you have in construction is people are very comfortable with the approach, and that approach has been around since 1983, right? And even before that, in terms of scheduling with P2 and projects like Artemis and things like that. So that's 40 years. So at some point we have to recognize that we have to make that leap and take a shot at going after something that's going to be a little bit more effective in producing the results we were expecting.
Okay, great. And another question that came in from Jeremy, I believe he asked this when you were showing again the example of the baseline schedule and the update, and he was wondering how those changes were incorporated into the model. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So you're talking about, yeah, go ahead, Raul, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You have the floor.
Well, no, I mean, I think there's a couple of different dynamics. That's what I was trying to state to earlier, is that the business process that is used for managing projects in terms of statusing schedules and incorporating impacts into the project are pretty much still the same. It's really the way you're visualizing the information. And Raul's magic on the other end of incorporating to the objects and being able to actually visualize that information is a process that happens very early. So similar to when we build baseline schedules, that's where all the cost is, right? In terms of time and development of the project schedule. Once you get into a business rhythm every single month, it's a status process. And it's a narrative, it's an identification of what's going on. That is similar to what you're seeing in terms of this world, because you spend the time to build the plan, you spend the time to integrate it with the objects, and then on a monthly basis, it's more of this is what happened on the job, these are the things that we're noticing, let's impact the plan, impact the model, if you want to do what if scenarios, but most of that time is on the front end. And then it's really a maintenance and reporting per se is the way I'm going to oversimplify it.
Sure. From a technical standpoint, it's as simple as just updating the schedule or updating the model from the field as the field tells us, because really that's where the rubber meets the road, right? The field needs to convey to us, hey, you know what, we hit a pipe, so we can't continue installing this other section because something happened out in the field. And then either a schedule is updated, or maybe we added a VAV box, in this area because we found that the calculations don't support only having 2 or 3, we need 5. Somebody needs to get that information back into the office, and then the people in the office either update their schedule, update their cost, update their model, and then it's just as simple for the guys in the background to update that schedule. And then the schedule has the intelligence where it's connected to the BIM objects. It's already connected to all the costs, where all you have to do is run a brand new animation or run through on the cloud platform and look at that same time segment again with the updated information that you receive. Good question.
Okay, and the next question comes in from Ruben, and he was wondering about facility management. And in your experience, do owners really take advantage of the models in order to use them for facility management?
Where I see it mostly is in P3s and when a contractor is responsible for that process, right? So, and obviously in the energy world they do, and I want to differentiate different industries. The energy world, the power systems, they definitely jump into it pretty heavily, right? But as an owner, but from a standpoint of most of the other things like maybe aviation, or if you're doing a toll road or something like that, the one that's really going to be managing the maintenance life cycle and tracking it through when it was installed and making sure that they're doing their standard maintenance approaches and what's the life cycle of materials. Those are things that we're seeing more on P3s, where a contractor is the one that's managing that. Now, where I have seen a lot of push in the recent years has been in the government, in the federal United States federal government. There is a lot of push towards facility life cycle management, and that means that everyone has the environments that control the asset management systems, but they're starting to really pinpoint, how do you know that something was installed? What's the warranty period? What's my maintenance life cycle? And then if things had to be repaired and replaced, what was the result of that? Because that could be used for intelligence on the next project. Make sure we don't buy that variable control drive next time, right? But this time we want to just track all that information. So we're starting to see, and like I said, I feel like in the United States, we're just getting into the speed of it, and I'm hoping that we'll run with it at 1,000 miles an hour as more and more people see what it really can do. But it's something that is it's been out there for many years, and there are definitely folks that use it, especially overseas.
Okay, and I think the last question that came up was around cloud-based issues. Lionel was wondering, cloud-based issues arise too, no longer a standalone local installations or network environment bring limitations, and cost and equipment are also limitations that customers and individuals face. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's always that's going to always be at the forefront. I mean, I think the migration to the cloud has been to try and address those limitations that we have locally, right? From using on-prem servers or local machines that maybe are not powerful enough to run an animation, run a schedule, run whatever it might be that you want to do. I think that's part of why we've gone to the cloud, because you can actually take a computer and use it as a POS system, much like a McDonald's or a Burger King, right? A point of sale system, and input your information up to the cloud. There's even softwares that you can run directly from the cloud. You don't need to install them on your local machines in order to achieve what you want to achieve. Of course, if you want to actually process some of the data, the organization is going to have to, at some point, say, you know what, we probably should purchase 1 or 2 of these machines so that we can process the data. But if you're doing smaller jobs, you can do it through the cloud with just your everyday computer. You might not be able to process a lot of the graphics that you want to locally. But again, some of those graphic intense calculations can be done up in the cloud.
Yeah, and what we're noticing now, we do a lot of software, part of our government operating solution side, we do a lot of software work. And one of the things we're noticing is that it's not only the push to the cloud, but it's also the thin client, right? So recognizing there are a lot of situations. First of all, we've been doing construction project controls all around the world. And you can imagine the many different places. And I imagine there's folks on this call that are either close to, living in, or have been to many of these locations that just don't have cellular towers. They don't have the access to the networks. So it's not only just the cloud-based solution, which a lot of these things. So we talked about Synchro earlier. That's a cloud-based solution. P6 is a cloud-based solution. They have a cloud environment, I should say. The Microsoft obviously does. Asta does, right? So everybody has these cloud environments, and they all integrate accordingly. But then you're also looking at a very thin client. So you don't need to have a powerful computer at your local to be able to run these, to run this. It's really just you're looking at a picture on your screen as opposed to really running power on your local computer. So they're thin clients.
And before we close out, I wanted to just kind of come back to our analogy here that we used at the beginning of our presentation of other games out there. I kind of jokingly put up there, we have Legos and Lincoln Logs and Minecraft, but just to show you an example of where some of the other folks across the pond are, and what they're doing. At the beginning, maybe to do models, somebody might have created a physical model, or maybe made a Lego model, or like my son right now, he's playing Minecraft. And he really helps keep me ahead with technology, because we've spent not just hours, days, and weeks, but months at a time for years now of building things on Minecraft. And that's happening across the pond. On the bottom left corner, you see a Minecraft assembly of a construction site with all the machinery and the buildings. And on the upper right-hand corner, you have a live capture of a site logistics plan happening in real time with a team. And they're almost indistinguishable. And that's where we're trying to get to with our, BIM dimensions, right? And right now, as we have spoken throughout this whole presentation, it's 3, 4, and 5D. Let's tie them together so we can get to this 8, 9, and 10D, and even do site logistics, pull off information, and catch up to what's going on out there.
Very cool. And I spoke too soon about the last question. We did have another one around prefabrication, and Edgar was wondering if BIM was being widely used in prefabrication.
Well, actually, we mentioned that earlier in spooling, mechanical systems. Yeah, that's a big area that we're looking at right now, and that is really establishing the fabrication model with the assembly model to the deployment to the site, and really planning the exact way you're going to build and how you're going to incorporate that into the actual construction, all the way back to the prefabrication stage, right? So the answer is yes. And like you're seeing here with this presentation, people are starting to say, hey, you know what, if I can just do this real quick, and I can do layouts, and I can do site layout real quick, then maybe I could take that one step back. Maybe I can run that out of my facility. The interesting thing is most of this design is already happening. You already have your site drawings. They're already down to the level in which you can provide this, you can already perform this type of intelligence. It's just going the extra step of integrating the schedule and time so that you can now start to determine when things need to happen, phase things, and be able to now assess when resources need to happen. What we're noticing more and more is that when we're getting into it, most of this is already ready to go. It's just really helping the client being able to see it, to establish the business processes, to start running the standard operating procedures, run a few with them so that they're prepared. And it's really pretty straightforward after that.
And a couple of people did ask if they could if we could get a copy of the presentation. So if that's something that you guys would be willing to share, just a PDF version, you can send that to me and I can forward it along to all attendees today.
Yeah, this is I actually don't even necessarily have a concern if you want to get the actual PowerPoint, although it's very big because it has all these videos in it. But we
Sure.
can definitely get you the PDF.
Okay, great. Well, I think that might be it for today. Do you have any closing thoughts before I just have a few reminders for folks?
Yeah, I just my only thing is, you know, it's just always pushing the consideration to try to take that extra step, right? Try it. You know, there's a lot of intelligence out there on how to do it, and it's just a matter of getting the opportunity to try it, get it into your program, see the results. That's where you're going to see the return on investment. The return on investment is pretty impressive when you start really living out of the design, and merging them all together is the most efficient means of managing a program.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I really want to thank you both for your presentation today. We've got great feedback already on the presentation. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you to
having us.
everybody.
Yeah, as mentioned, for anyone looking to receive continuing education credits, you can access your credits and a certificate of completion in your CMAA Learning Center. It'll be under the completed tab by the end of today. And just as a reminder, the next CMAA webinar is on women in commissioning, and it will be held on Thursday, December 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. But that concludes today's webinar. Thanks again for joining, everyone, and we hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye now.